Everest is the highest point on Earth, a dream and a grave for hundreds of climbers. But behind the icy slopes and deadly winds lies something far more sinister. People disappear without a trace, hear voices, and see figures that shouldn't be there. The permafrost keeps the bodies, but sometimes the mountain reveals something that even scares the scientists. What's happening on Everest? Why do some of the secrets of this mountain remain classified? And the main question is, what really lies behind the white veil of snow? Are you ready to find out the truth? Then let's climb higher. Into the heart of horror. Everest is one of the harshest places on the planet, where icy silence reigns. Here, at an altitude of more than 29,000 feet, the air is thin and temperatures can drop below minus 60 degrees. In Fahrenheit. No one expects to hear sounds in this icy desert. But despite the silence, climbers report hearing strange screams echoing in the night. It's not the howling of the wind or the sound of avalanches. These screams sound human, but they're unnatural, too drawn out, too distant, as if they're coming from the very heart of the glacier. Sometimes it seems like it's just an echo walking among the rocks. But there are times when the scream comes from right next to you, just behind the climber. Some claim that these are the voices of the dead, whose last breath got lost in the permafrost. Others are sure that it is something else, not connected with humans. In 2012, a climbing expedition claimed to have heard not just screams, but words. Someone called out the name of one of the group members, but the most frightening incident was in 2004. One of the climbers reported hearing a female voice crying somewhere below. He tried to convince the others to come down, thinking that someone was in trouble. The others heard nothing, but the man was sure that someone was calling for help. He went down, and no one ever saw him again. Some believe it's just hallucinations caused by a lack of oxygen. But there's one. But the sound was recorded on the audio device of one of the expeditions. Something, or someone is really making those sounds. Or maybe it's not just a scream. Maybe someone is calling to lure a victim into a trap. More than 300 people have died on Everest, and most of them remain there forever. But some bodies are found, while others simply disappear. Usually, when a climber gets into trouble, their body is found later. Frozen, mangled, buried under snow. However, there are people who have disappeared without a trace. They weren't taken by avalanches, and they didn't fall into crevasses. Their tracks just ended. In 1997, a group of experienced climbers was making their way to the summit. One of them, named Mark, was walking ahead when a strange noise suddenly rang out. The teammates got distracted for just a second, and he vanished. The tracks in the snow just stopped. There were no cliffs or crevasses in that spot. The rescuers never found a single clue that could explain his disappearance. But there are even stranger cases. In 2010, a group found a sleeping bag and gear belonging to a climber who had gone missing 10 years earlier. They were perfectly preserved, as if they had just been left behind. However, the man himself was never found. Where do these people go? Why aren't their bodies found? And the most important question is, what did they see in their final moments? In 2015, climbers stumbled upon an old dictaphone, half buried in snow. It belonged to a missing person who, according to official reports, died on the slope over 10 years ago. When the recording was restored, people heard terrifying sounds. At first, there was heavy breathing, like panic hyperventilation. Then there were muffled words. A male voice kept repeating the same thing. They're here, they're here. Then strange noises followed. It was as if someone approached the dictaphone and leaned in close to it. Then the recording suddenly cuts off. The strangest thing is that, according to official reports, no one was near him at the time of the recording. That day, he was completely alone. But if he was alone, then who are they? Climbers often encounter a phenomenon known as a phantom guide. Many swear that during their ascent, someone walks alongside them, an invisible companion whose presence is felt on an instinctual level. Some hear a voice that gives advice. Be careful. Don't go that way. You've taken a wrong turn. Sometimes climbers even have conversations with this invisible creature, asking for directions or advice. But the strangest thing is that these voices often save lives. In 1996, a climber who survived a snowstorm reported that an unfamiliar voice told him to move on when he was about to give up. He walked through the deep snow all alone, and then he turned around and saw someone's tracks next to his own. It's believed to be a trick of the mind on the edge of life and death. But then why do different people describe the same figure? In 2017, a group of climbers discovered an old diary at an altitude of over 25,000 feet. Its pages were frozen and cracked, but the writings were still legible. It belonged to a man who went missing over 10 years ago. At first, the recordings were pretty normal. Description of the route, temperature, fatigue. But then they started getting weirder. I hear them. They're calling me. I'm not alone. They're walking beside me. They're watching. They're waiting. The scariest part. His last entry was made after the date of his death. But if the person is already dead, then who made this entry? One of the scariest things that climbers on Everest talk about is the voices they hear in their heads. They come when a person is on the verge of exhaustion, when the cold penetrates into the bones and the thin air makes the mind work slowly and confusedly. The voices say different things. Sometimes they ask, "Take off your mask, it's warm here." Sometimes they advise, "Take a step to the right." Sometimes they just whisper, "Rest, lie down." This phenomenon is officially called hypoxia, a lack of oxygen in the brain. But what's strange is that different climbers from different countries at different times have heard the same words. In 1992, a British climber was on his way to the summit when he heard a woman's voice. It was gentle, almost hypnotic. The voice urged him to turn around and go back down. The man paused for a second, but something inside him made him ignore those words and keep going. When he got back to base camp and told them about it, the guide's face changed. He said that this voice had been heard before. Those who listened never came back. At altitudes over 26,000 feet, many climbers experience auditory hallucinations. But why do the voices always guide you down into the abyss? Maybe there really is something on Everest that's waiting for new victims. Everest is not just a mountain. It's a graveyard that holds hundreds of secrets. The permafrost keeps the remains of people, but sometimes the ice gives up something even stranger. In 2018, a group of climbers stumbled upon some strange objects. Wooden figurines, partially burned, scattered among the rocks. It seemed like part of an ancient ritual. The strangest place where they were found. There were no camps here, and the only known expedition in this area perished many years ago. In another case, they found a piece of old fabric covered in strange symbols. Historians who have studied the find have said it could be part of an ancient Tibetan curse designed to keep something trapped inside the mountain. Maybe all these findings are just a coincidence. Or maybe the people who go missing on Everest become part of a ritual that has been going on for centuries. Deaths on Everest can be explained by extreme conditions of frostbite, lack of oxygen. But there are things that defy logic. There are several cases where people died in the same way, although their tragedies were separated by decades. 2 climbers from different countries died 25 years apart on the same section of the mountain. In the same position, lying down with their arms outstretched, as if they were trying to grab onto something. Another chilling pattern. The climbers who died on the slope kept diaries. They often had similar phrases. "I'm not alone anymore. They are watching, they are waiting." But the strangest case happened in 2006. One of the climbers took a break in the death zone and saw a man sitting in the snow. He looked frozen, but still alive. The man approached, but froze in horror. It was a man who had died here exactly a year ago. Coincidence? Or is there really something on this mountain that keeps repeating the same story over and over again? In recent years, scientists have noted that Everest is starting to change. And these changes are frightening even to those who have studied it their whole lives. First of all, bodies are being found at the summit that were previously hidden under the ice. Due to global warming, the glaciers are melting, and the mountain is starting to reveal what it has kept hidden for decades. Bodies, things, even entire tent camps that disappeared decades ago are appearing. But there are things that are even more frightening. Scientists have recorded changes in the structure of the mountain itself. In some places, new cracks are appearing, and in others, it looks like someone has deliberately smoothed out the snow, hiding something beneath it. And lastly, magnetic anomalies. Some climbers report that their compasses start acting weird, the needles spin, and the devices lose their orientation. In certain spots, GPS navigators just refuse to work. What's happening with Everest? Maybe what's been locked inside is starting to come out. Among all the mystical stories, Everest has one of the scariest. Stories about an unknown creature that has been seen on the slopes. They say it's not the Yeti. It's taller, thinner, moves quickly and silently. Its figure resembles a human, but something about the proportions is off. In 2013, a group of climbers reported seeing a silhouette near their camp at night. It stood still for a moment, then took a few quick steps and vanished into the snow. Others claimed to have noticed strange footprints appearing near their tents overnight. They do not resemble human or animal tracks. Sometimes, they just suddenly stop, as if the creature simply dissolved into thin air. The creepiest story is about someone feeling breath on the back of the neck, and when they turned around, there was no one there. What is that shadow sliding down the slopes of Everest? Maybe it's the reason behind all the disappearances. Hundreds of climbers who have spent the night in tents at high altitudes tell of the strange phenomenon of lights that flash in the darkness. They appear suddenly, sometimes hovering in the air, sometimes moving at incredible speeds, and at times, it seems like they're gliding right above the summit. In 2011, a group of researchers recorded a strange glow at an altitude of more than 26,000 feet. It lasted for several minutes before suddenly disappearing. The cameras captured a faint flickering light, but its nature could not be determined. Some explain it as bursts of atmospheric electricity or light reflections. But there are stories that are hard to chalk up to scientific explanations. In 1994, a climber reported seeing two bright lights that moved in sync, as if searching for something. He watched them for about 10 minutes before they disappeared. And in 1975, two Japanese climbers reported seeing a bright glow that resembled eyes looking at them in the dark. A few hours later, one of them disappeared in an unknown direction. Is there an explanation for this? Or maybe someone or something is watching those who are trying to conquer the summit. Everest is a graveyard where hundreds of bodies lie in the snow. The temperatures here are so low that the process of decomposition hardly happens. Some bodies look like they just froze a few hours ago, even though decades have actually passed. The most famous case is Green Boots. This is the body of a climber that has served as a landmark for those ascending to the summit for over 20 years. The man died back in 1996, but his body was preserved so well that even his face remains visible. But there are discoveries that raise even more questions. In 2018, a body was found on one of the passes, dressed in early 20th century clothing. It was so well preserved that scientists initially couldn't determine its age. Only after the analysis did they find out that this was one of the first explorers of Everest who went missing over 100 years ago. How did these people freeze? What did they see in their last moments? Some bodies are found in unnatural positions with faces frozen in horror. It was as if, at the moment of death, they were looking at something that should not have been there. There are bodies that didn't just freeze. They look as if the person died in a moment of extreme horror. Some climbers found the remains with their eyes wide open, as if the person had seen something impossible. In 2017, a group of climbers discovered a body that was sitting, leaning against a rock. His arms were stretched out in front of him, and his mouth was open, as if he was trying to say something before he died. The strangest position of some of the dead. People who would never fall asleep in such a position have been found sitting, as if they were waiting for someone. Why do they have such expressions? Faces. What was their last sight? Maybe the fear they experienced was so intense that even death couldn't erase its traces. At an altitude of over 26,000 feet, the death zone begins. The air here is so thin that the human body literally starts to break down. The brain experiences oxygen deprivation, and a person starts to see hallucinations. But the problem is that many people see the same thing. People describe silhouettes standing at the summit that don't move but always remain in sight. Some climbers say they have seen a man showing them the way. When they followed him, he disappeared. And if they didn't follow, they found themselves in a life-threatening situation. Others describe black figures moving among the rocks. They appear only for a moment, but the feeling of their presence lingers for hours. Is it true, hallucinations? Or is something in the death zone watching those who pass through it? Among the local Sherpas there is a legend about the White Lady, a ghostly woman who appears on the mountain slopes before tragedies. She's only seen by those who are destined to perish. The story began in 1924 when British climber George Mallory and his partner went missing during their ascent. Some Sherpas later claimed that a few days before their disappearance, they saw a woman in white standing on one of the rocks. Since then, many have seen her. In 1995, a French climber reported noticing a female figure dressed in something light. She stood in the distance, but when he blinked, she was gone. A few hours later, he fell into the abyss. The White Lady appears before those who are not meant to come back. Maybe it's just a myth, but those who have seen her can no longer tell the truth. There is an invisible line on Everest that few people talk about. This is the place where no one comes back. It is located near the top, where the air becomes almost unbreathable, and every second can be the last. Experienced climbers know about this place and call it the ominous line. Here, devices act strangely, GPS navigators refuse to work, and compasses start spinning, losing their orientation. It's in this spot that people most often start seeing things that shouldn't be there. Figures moving in the distance. Distorted faces in the snow, shadows sliding across the glacier. But the most frightening thing is that those who cross this border rarely return. In recent years, scientists have noticed that even satellite images of the area look strange, as if the image is slightly blurred and distorted. Maybe it's just a coincidence, or maybe there's really a place on Everest where there's no way back. Some discoveries on Everest are so strange that they are forbidden to talk about. In 2019, a group of researchers reported a finding that could change our understanding of the mountain, but the details were never revealed. Their report was classified, and the expedition members refused to comment. That same year, Indian soldiers discovered huge footprints leading deep into the mountains. They were captured on camera, but soon the report disappeared from public access. There were rumors that researchers stumbled upon something that shouldn't have fallen into the hands of the general public. Some claimed that ancient structures have been found on Everest, beneath the ice, that couldn't possibly belong to any known civilization. But the strangest thing is the official silence. Why does no one want to talk about these findings? And what exactly are they hiding? In 2023, a group of climbers got in touch with base camp, reporting that they had stumbled upon something incredible. Their voices were trembling. They said they found tracks that couldn't possibly belong to a human. The connection was lost. None of them came back. Their bodies were never found. The last message that was recorded was, "We are not alone." Everest remains a mystery. The mountain welcomes new climbers every year, but it doesn't let everyone go back. Voices, disappearances, strange findings, it's all just part of the mysteries it hides. But what if these secrets are not just coincidences? What if behind the icy walls, there really is something that's watching us? Some believe that there's a place on Everest where humans shouldn't go. Maybe that's the real reason why even the most experienced climbers make fatal mistakes or disappear forever.